Hello, my friends. Welcome back. In today's video, we want to solve one of the problems from the Leetcode website. Initially, I thought that I would probably want to solve the problem of the day, but today is the December 17th, but like they've already posted, as you can see, the problem of the day for the next day. And as we can see here, it's rated as an easy question, and the acceptance rate is like 52%, which is interesting for an easy problem. But anyway, so then I decided that I would do probably like a hard one. So if we go into the filters in here and just like choose all the hard ones and look into these, I found this guy, the valid numbers, right? It's rated as hard and the acceptance rate is only 19.3%. So this should be an interesting one, right? Let's look into that. So the problem is actually identifying a valid number. What's a valid number? It says that a valid number can be split up into these components. So it's either a decimal number or an integer. If it's a decimal, then you have to follow these rules, right? There has to be, or there could be, it says optional, a sign, negative or positive sign, excuse me. And then it says there could be one or more digits followed by a dot, one or more digits followed by a dot, and then followed by some other digits, and a dot followed by one or more digits. So something like 0.5 is still a valid number. And here it says that for your integer, it can be like either small or capital E for like the power of the integer. And then it also says that your integer can also have like a plus or negative sign, and it can obviously have multiple digits. And here it gives you a bunch of valid examples: 20089, negative 0.1, and all of these are valid numbers. Sounds good. And look at these guys in here, and these are not valid numbers. ABC is not a valid number. 1A is not a valid number because we're talking base 10. So maybe if it was like a hex number, then sure, yeah, 1A could be a valid value, but it's not in this case. And here you can see some of the examples, and it says, for example, 0, it's true. E, just false because it doesn't mean anything. Just a dot, it's just not a number. It's not a valid number. Cool. So let's look at the function that there is here. Like the input to the function is a string. So that's the input. Let's just copy the name of the function and start coding. Define my function is number, and the input to the function is a string s. And let's see what we can do. The first thing that we need to do is to decide if the input string is representing an integer or a decimal number. So we want to have helper functions for each of them. I'm just going to go decide if it's an integer, right? And I define my function and I go, like, for example, isn't, right? And obviously the input to this function is s. And the first thing that I want to check is to check to see if you're passing an empty string, right? So I just want to go if not s, then return false. Okay. And before we continue, I just want to go return true. And so by default, I would assume that it's an integer, and then I check the conditions that make it wrong. And if it was wrong, I'll just go return false. So this line would be ignored. So yeah, as you saw, the first thing that I would check is to see if I'm passing anything at all, right? The next thing that we want to check, based on what they defined here, for an integer, we can check if there is a sign, right? So let's do this work now. I want to go if S0, the first character, is a plus sign, or S0 equals like a negative sign, then exclude that. So I'm update S would be S1 to the end. So I'm just going to get rid of the sign and consider the rest, right? And I want to repeat this part in here. Why? You may ask. It's because let's say that you have something like this. Let's say the input to the function is string, negative sign in there, or just like this. So after removing this, you're left with nothing. So there is nothing to do the operation on, and like we check if it's an integer or not. So we want to return false. That's what I did here. And after doing this, there is no other condition to check for integers. So, I mean, there is, which would be like the E thingy, but I'll take care of that later. Like before calling each of these functions, I want to like see what's happening with, like, I want to like do some pre-processing before calling this function. When I'm calling this function, I'm just assuming that everything is just like in the format that I want. And finally, the last thing that we need to do, I want to go if not s dot is digit, right? Then return false, right? What is this guy? It's an interesting function. So if I just go here and go Python, and let's look at the very first website, it says the isDigit method returns true if all the characters are digits, otherwise false. Cool. So this is what this function does, and you can see the example here. If you try it, all the characters are digits, so it's going to return true, right? Anyway, so this is what this function does. I don't know if you knew about this or not, but this is a cool function. So this is our first helper method. The other one that I want to define is decide if it's a decimal value, right? So define is decimal. Obviously, the input to this function would also be s, and I want to do the same thing, right? So let me just like copy everything here, and well, actually, like everything from here. If I do this, I want to go, just tap this backward. If not s, then return false. Obviously, if it's an empty string, I don't want to do anything on it. And in the next part, we're going to exclude the sign, right? So if it's like there was a plus or negative sign in the beginning, just get rid of that and update as. After you update it, then just like do the comparison again, like see if it's null or like an empty string or not. Here, we want to do something else too, right? We want to go here and say if, right, there is a dot in s, right? So if there is a dot, what do we want to do, right? We want to go s equals s dot replace. We basically want to replace the dot with like nothing, because like a dot is valid. We don't care about it, and it would be okay. So if there was a dot, we're just gonna get rid of the dot, right? And then after doing that, we want to do basically the same check again, see if it's like an empty list or not. An empty string or not. And then after doing this, then we can basically do this again, right? We got rid of the dot, so everything there has to be digits now. Again, could be like E, as like the question says here, like we could have any of these cases. But before calling each of these helper methods, as I said before, I would run a pre-processing and just get rid of those as well. So I don't need to worry about it here. So I'm just going to go if not s that is digit, then return false, which is like what we just explained. And if that wasn't the case, then I want to return true. Okay, so these are the helper functions that I have, and I don't want to do anything else. And now I want to go ahead and do some pre-processing. So I'm just going to go pre-processing part. We can close this so there is more room. We can see what's going on exactly here. And for pre-processing, it says, as the question says, there could be either lowercase or uppercase e. So what I want to do, I want to go s equals s.lower. S.lower. So what this function does is that it takes the string s as an input, right? And just converts it to lowercase. So everything in that string would be in lowercase, right? And if it's already lowercase, it just doesn't do anything. Now that I have that, I want to go if there is an E in S, then what do I want to do, right? I want to like separate it into two parts, right? Let's say, for example, look at this example in here. One of the examples that they have is this guy in here. Let's just bring this, right? And put it here as an example and see how we're dealing with that. And let's just change that a bit. I just want to go like add more digits here and more, oops, these are not digits, and more digits here, right? So the plus sign and the negative sign, like we took care of it, so we don't need to worry about it here. So we can get rid of it. And then like we have something like this, and like there was a letter E here. And let's say this was like a capital E. After doing this, it would be lowercase e. That's cool. So what I want to do now is to divide it. If there is an E in here, then I want to divide it into two parts, this, and call each of these two functions on each part to make sure that each part is actually a digit. So let's say that we have like this example, right? This. What I want to do, I want to go part one is this guy without the E, obviously. And part two would be plus this, right? And I want to run each of these helper methods on each of these to make sure that they are all digits, right? So this is what I want to do. So here I can just go, for example, part one, as I said, that equals s dot split. So we want to split it. But how do we want to split it? We want to split it at E, right? And the first occurrence of it, like make it part 0, like that's the left side of the E. And then we can do basically the same thing. That would be part 2, as I said. And, well, this has to be 1, right? So we have like these two parts, and we want to run these functions on it. So I want to go part 1 valid, right, is what do we want to do? We can actually do something else. We can do just like a one-line empty return. What do we want to return, right? We want to return, and what is it that we're returning? Is int of part 1. So part 1 could be either an integer. Imagine this, like this could be this, right? So part 1 could be either an integer or, right, is decimal of part 1. So if the part 1, this part in here, which we changed it to like with this part. So if it's an integer, like there is no dot, or if it's a decimal, it's valid. But we also have to consider this one. So if this condition is true, right, and we do basically the same thing for the other one is integer part 2. We don't have to check part 2 for being a decimal, because you cannot have like this. It just doesn't make any sense to like have like a decimal exponent. That just is not a valid number. So if part 2 is an integer and part 1 is either an integer or a decimal, then this is true, right? And if this is not the case, which means that like we don't really have an E in there, we basically want to return, what do we want to return? We want to return is int of s, because like there was no E in there. So we just want to consider like check if it's like an integer or a decimal. So I'm just going to go or is decimal des. So that's basically all we need to do. Just to go over it one more time, we have two helper functions that decide if the input is just like as I'm explaining. It occurred to me that like this s obviously is not the same as this S in here, because like here, look at this. Before doing any operation, I changed the S, and then I used that like to get P1 and P2, and then used P1 and P2 as input to these functions. So these S's are not necessarily the same. They could be in some cases, but it doesn't have to. So we have these two helper functions, right? That decides if the input is an integer or if it's a decimal. You could merge these two functions as well and do the proper checks as well. But anyway, and then like not to have to deal with like uppercase E and lowercase e, because like if you don't do this step, we have to repeat these for capital E as well, which is basically repeat this, and instead of lowercase e, I just have to go uppercase E, right? But like having a lot of if statements is not maybe good, but it's up to you. You can try and see what performance you get. So I just go lowercase, and then if there is an E in there, I split it into two parts, the first part and the exponent part, which is part 2. And then I consider a check if part 1 is valid, which is like either integer or decimal, and part 2, which is the exponent, has to be an integer. So that's why I do like an AND here and say, okay, only is int. I don't want it to be a decimal. It has to be an integer. And if not, that's not the case, so you don't have an E in there, so the input has to be either an integer or a decimal value. And this should work. And I've actually tried it, and I know for a fact that it's working, and I got really good performance out of it too. So if I copy that and come in here and paste my answer, hopefully everything is lined. No, it's not. So I just have to tab everything over. And so if I close this function, yeah, it should be good now. So if I submit, and gonna have to log in first. So let me log in and see the results. Okay, I'm logged in and we're back, and that's the same code, submit it, and it's judging my code now and see what happens. And it says that it beats like 82% of the users using Python 3. Interesting thing, I realized like if I submit again, I may actually get a different result. So it was 82%, and now like it went down to 75%. I don't really know what's happening with their server. Like, yeah, I have no idea. If you do, let me know in the comments below what's happening. So it keeps going down, but sometimes like when I run it again, it went up. I think the best that I ever got for this code was like 95%, 95.55. That's the max that I got, right? I just want to run it one more time, see what happens, honestly. It went up again to like 86%. Anyway, this was the solution that I could came up with. Let me know if you have better solutions, like if you could speed up this code in any way. Maybe like having two if statements instead of using like this function in here would improve your performance. I don't know. You let me know in the comment section. Hopefully you enjoyed this video and it taught you something, I'm hoping. And if you did like it, then please like the video as well. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so to support me, and also not to miss the next videos when I upload them. Thank you for watching me again. Take care. See you guys all in the next video. Bye-bye.